A whimpering Belgian Malinois puppy lay trembling in the snow, blood staining its golden coat as a circle of grey wolves closed in for the kill. Just when hope seemed lost, a silhouette appeared on the ridge. A woman with a rifle and scars. Of her own. What happened next would change both their lives forever. In the remote wilderness of northern Montana, where survival is never guaranteed, an abandoned military service puppy and a decorated but broken army ranger found each other at their darkest moment. This is the story of how two wounded warriors formed an unbreakable bond that would heal them both and inspire thousands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Alexandra Alex Novak hadn't planned to be in the mountains that December morning. Her cabin in the isolated reaches of Glacier National Park was supposed to be a retreat, a place to hide from the world and the memories that haunted her. 2 tours in Afghanistan, a Silver Star for valor, and then the IED that shattered her Humvee and left 3 of her team dead. The physical wounds had healed over 15 months of surgeries and rehabilitation, but the other scars, the ones no one could see, those were the reason she'd fled to this remote corner of Montana. The harsh winter landscape matched the desolation she felt inside. Jagged peaks, unforgiving winds, and temperatures that punished any mistake. It wasn't peace she sought in this wilderness. It was oblivion. A place where the only decisions that mattered were the ones that kept you alive through the night. That morning dawned bitter cold, the thermometer outside her cabin window reading 15 below zero. A storm was forecast for the afternoon. Another blizzard in a series that had pummeled the region for weeks. Alex had planned to spend the day chopping extra firewood and securing her generator before the weather closed in. Simple tasks, predictable, safe. But something had drawn her to the ridge trail instead, some restlessness she couldn't name. With her rifle slung over her shoulder and her service dog Ranger, a battle-seasoned German shepherd, trotting beside her, she'd headed into the trees, following a game trail that wound through the skeletal aspens and snow-laden pines. The silence of the forest was absolute, the kind of stillness that swallows sound. Only the crunch of her boots in the crusted snow and the rhythmic panting of Ranger broke the perfect quiet. Alex moved with the measured precision of someone accustomed to hostile territory, eyes constantly scanning, mind cataloging every detail. Old habits from a life she was trying to forget. It was Ranger who noticed first. The shepherd's ears pricked forward, his body suddenly tense. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Alex whispered, dropping to one knee beside him, hand automatically moving to the rifle strap. Ranger's gaze was fixed on something beyond the next ridge. Alex followed his line of sight, seeing nothing at first against the blinding white of the snow-covered slope. Then she heard it, a high, thin sound, almost like a child's cry, quickly cut off. Something in that sound clutched at her chest. It was the sound of terror, of desperation. She moved forward cautiously, Ranger tight, against her side. As they crested the ridge, the scene below froze her in place. In a small clearing at the base of a rocky outcropping, a pack of wolves, 7, maybe 8, had formed a tightening circle around something small and golden-furred that lay thrashing weakly in the blood-stained snow. The wolves moved with practiced patience, darting into nip, then retreating, wearing down their prey's resistance. Alex raised her binoculars. What she saw made her breath catch. Not a fox or coyote pup as she'd first thought, but a dog. A puppy, really, though. Its breed was unmistakable. A Belgian Malinois, the same breed used by military K9 units worldwide for their intelligence, loyalty, and fearlessness. This one couldn't be more than 4 months old. How a military working dog puppy had ended up alone in these mountains was a question for later. Right now, the animal was seconds from death. Without conscious thought, Alex was moving, slipping down the slope with Ranger beside her. She raised her rifle and fired a shot into the air. The wolves scattered at the sound, but didn't retreat far. They circled warily, yellow eyes fixed on what they clearly considered their rightful meal. "Get back!" Alex shouted, firing another warning shot. Most of the pack slunk further away, but one remained, larger than the others, with a scarred muzzle that suggested previous encounters with humans. It held its ground, lips pulled back to reveal impressive canines, a growl vibrating from deep in its chest. Ranger responded with a threatening bark, positioning himself between Alex and the wolf. There was a moment of tension, a silent standoff between predators. Then the wolf seemed to calculate the odds and decided they weren't favorable. With a final snarl, it turned and loped after its pack, disappearing into the trees. Only then did Alex rush forward to the puppy. It lay motionless, now its golden-brown fur matted with blood and snow. There were puncture wounds on its flank and rear leg where the wolves had begun their attack. Most concerning was a deeper laceration across its shoulder that seemed older than the rest, the likely reason it had been vulnerable to predators. In the first place, the puppy's eyes were closed, its breathing shallow and labored. Alex quickly removed her outer jacket despite the biting cold and wrapped the small body carefully. As she lifted it, the pup's eyes fluttered open briefly, amber eyes clouded with pain, but containing a flicker of something that struck Alex to her core. Not just fear or suffering, but a fierce will to survive. "Hey, little warrior," she murmured, cradling the bundle against her chest. "Stay with me." Ranger sniffed anxiously at the puppy, his usual stoicism replaced by evident concern. The shepherd had been Alex's constant companion through the worst of her recovery, seeming to understand her pain in ways no human could. Now, he sensed another soul in need. Alex turned back toward her cabin, calculating quickly. The nearest veterinary clinic was in Whitefish, over 40 miles away through mountain roads that would be treacherous even before the storm hit. The puppy might not survive the journey. Her training kicked in. In the field, you worked with what you had. You stabilized, assessed, and adapted. The puppy needed immediate attention, and her cabin contained a well-stocked medical kit, a legacy of her own injuries and the painful months of recovery that followed. As she trudged through the deepening snow, the small body in her arms grew increasingly still. "Don't you quit on me," she whispered fiercely. "You hear that? That's an order, soldier." The words surprised her. It had been months since she'd referenced anything from her military life. Those memories belonged to someone else, a woman who had believed in purpose and service before watching half her unit die in a spray of shrapnel and fire. By the time she reached the cabin, the storm clouds had swallowed the sun, and the first heavy snowflakes were beginning to fall. The wind had picked up, driving the snow horizontally across the clearing. Alex shouldered open the door, grateful for the wall of warmth that greeted her from the wood stove. She cleared the kitchen table with one sweep of her arm, sending her breakfast dishes clattering to the floor, then gently laid down her jacket with its precious cargo. The puppy didn't stir as she unwrapped it. In the harsh light of the kitchen, the animal looked even worse, scrawny beneath its fur, ribs clearly visible, multiple wounds telling a story of hardship beyond today's wolf attack. Working methodically, Alex gathered her supplies. Antiseptic, bandages, a suture kit she hoped she wouldn't need, antibiotics left over from her last surgery. Ranger stationed himself beside the table, his intelligent eyes never leaving the puppy. As Alex cut away the matted fur around the wounds, her mind raced. A Belgian Malinois puppy didn't end up in the wilderness by accident. These dogs were valuable, bred specifically for military and police work, with bloodlines carefully tracked. This one bore no collar, but as she cleaned the mud from its coat, she noticed something on the inner thigh, a small tattoo. Numbers and letters, In a pattern she recognized immediately from her time working with canine units. "You're military," she murmured, something cold settling in her stomach. "But what are you doing out here alone?" The pattern of wounds told a disturbing story. The shoulder laceration was clean-edged, a knife wound, not an animal bite. Someone had deliberately injured this puppy and then abandoned it to die in the wilderness. The realization ignited something in Alex that she hadn't felt in a very long time, a burning, righteous anger. She had seen the worst humanity could do during her tours, had grown numb to cruelty. But this, the deliberate discarding of a living creature bred to serve, broke through the protective shell she'd built around herself. "I've got you now," she promised, her voice steady as she cleaned the wounds. "No one's going to hurt you again." Duddozo. The next hours blurred together as Alex fought to save the puppy's life. The wound on its shoulder required stitches after all, a delicate procedure that left her hands cramping and her forehead beaded with sweat, despite the chill that seeped through the cabin windows. The puppy remained unconscious through it all, its only sign of life the shallow rise and fall of its ribcage. Outside, the storm arrived in full force, howling around the cabin like a living thing. The afternoon light faded early, plunging the forest into darkness. Alex kept the wood stove blazing and created a makeshift bed beside it, lining a shallow wooden crate with blankets and gently transferring the puppy from the table. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside the crate, Ranger's solid warmth against her side. "What happened to you?" she asked softly, stroking the puppy's head with a gentle finger. "Who threw away a perfectly good war dog?" The tattoo was the key. In the morning, if the storm had passed, she could try to make a call from the ridge where cell reception sometimes appeared. Contact her old unit, see if anyone could trace the code. For now, though, all she could do was wait and hope the small fighter survived the night. As darkness settled completely, the temperature outside plummeting, Alex found herself doing something she hadn't done since leaving the hospital. She talked. At first, it was just practical narration as she checked the puppy's wounds and managed to get a few droppers of water down its throat. But gradually, in the safety of the storm-wrapped cabin, with only Ranger and an unconscious puppy to hear, other words came. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She spoke of Afghanistan, the heat and dust and moments of stark terror, of the friends she'd lost and the nightmares that followed her home, of the medals they'd pinned to her chest while she was still on pain medication, unable to feel anything beyond a dull, persistent guilt that she had survived when others hadn't. "I came up here to disappear," she admitted, watching the gentle rise and fall of the puppy's side. "Thought maybe if I got far enough away from everything, the memories would fade. Stupid, right? Turns out they just get louder when there's nothing else to drown them out." Around midnight, the puppy stirred, letting out a small whimper. Alex immediately leaned forward, heart racing. Amber eyes opened, clouded with pain, but unmistakably alert. The puppy tried to raise its head. "Easy, easy," Alex soothed, placing a gentle hand on its neck. "You're safe now." The puppy's gaze locked onto hers, a look of such intensity it almost took her breath away. There was fear there, certainly, but something else too, recognition perhaps, one warrior acknowledging another. "You need a name," Alex said quietly. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Phoenix, because you refused to die when they left you for dead." The puppy, Phoenix, held her gaze for a moment longer, then allowed its head to sink back onto the blanket. But something had changed. There was a tension in the small body now, an alertness that hadn't been there before. The will to survive had become a determination to live. Alex stroked the soft fur between Phoenix's ears. Rest now. We've got a long road ahead. D. As the night deepened and the storm raged around the isolated cabin, two broken soldiers, one human, one canine, formed a silent pact. Neither understood yet how much they needed each other, how this chance encounter in the wilderness would reshape both their destinies. But as Phoenix drifted back to sleep under Alex's watchful eye, something shifted in the atmosphere. The faintest suggestion that endings sometimes disguise themselves as beginnings. And in that moment, for the first time since the explosion that had shattered her world, Captain Alexandra Novak felt something stir within her chest. The first fragile flicker of purpose returning to a heart she'd thought was beyond repair. Dawn broke reluctantly over the snow-shrouded mountains, pale light filtering through the ice-rimmed windows of Alex's cabin. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Pristine white drifts sculpted by the wind, trees bowed under the weight of fresh snow, and a silence so complete it seemed to press against the glass like a physical force. Alex hadn't slept. She'd maintained her vigil beside Phoenix through the dark hours, checking vital signs, refreshing bandages, and administering small amounts of water with an eyedropper when the puppy seemed able to swallow. Ranger had stayed equally alert, leaving his post only occasionally to nudge Alex's hand or press his muzzle against the edge of Phoenix's makeshift bed, as if reassuring himself the puppy still breathed. Morning revealed both progress and concern. Phoenix's breathing had steadied and the bleeding had stopped, but fever now radiated from the small body. Infection, the wilderness's secondary weapon after teeth and claws. Alex had anticipated this possibility and already begun a regimen of antibiotics, crushing a tablet into the water she administered. But the developing fever meant a narrowing window of time. As she changed the bandage on Phoenix's shoulder, the puppy's eyes opened. Again, clearer than the night before, but glazed with pain. A small whimper escaped, then something unexpected. Phoenix tried to lick Alex's hand, the briefest touch of tongue against skin. "Fighting spirit," Alex murmured, feeling the unexpected sting of tears. "That's good. Hold on to that." She glanced toward the window, calculating. The storm had cleared, which meant possible cell reception on the ridge. She needed information, what this tattoo meant, where Phoenix had come from, and most importantly, what medical considerations might be specific to the puppy's breed and condition. But leaving meant risking Phoenix's life if the puppy took a turn for the worse during her absence. "Ranger guard," she commanded, the familiar words feeling strange on her tongue after months of speaking to the shepherd as merely a companion rather than the working dog he'd been trained to be. Ranger immediately assumed an alert posture beside Phoenix's bed, understanding in his intelligent eyes. Alex bundled up against the bitter cold and stepped outside, the snow reaching midway up her calves. The thermometer beside the door read 20 below zero. Dangerous conditions, but the sky was clear, which meant she had perhaps a 2-hour window before the next weather system moved in from the west. The climb to the ridge was punishing. Normally a 30-minute hike, it took her nearly an hour to navigate the fresh, deep snow, her boots breaking through the crust with each step. Her injured leg, a souvenir from the IED that had claimed her team, ached fiercely in the cold. The titanium rod that now reinforced her femur, seeming to conduct the freezing temperature directly into her bone marrow. At the summit, breathless and sweating despite the cold, Alex pulled out her satellite phone, the emergency communication she'd promised her doctors she'd maintain but had rarely used. To her relief, 2 bars of signal strength appeared. Enough. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 8 months. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Master Sergeant Wallace." "Mike, it's Novak." A startled pause, then warmth flooded the connection. "Holy shit, Captain. We thought you'd gone full mountain hermit on us. You okay?" The simple question carried layers of meaning between two soldiers who'd served together. Was she breathing? Eating? Still fighting the darkness that had engulfed her after the ambush? "I'm managing," she answered truthfully, "but I need your help with something K9 related." "Ranger, okay?" Concern sharpened his voice. Wallace had been the one to pair Alex with the shepherd during her rehabilitation, recognizing that the wounded warrior needed the companionship of another battle-tested soul. "Ranger's fine. It's another dog, a Belgian Malinois puppy, maybe 4 months old. I found it in the wilderness yesterday, nearly killed by wolves." She described the tattoo, reading off the alphanumeric sequence. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. When Wallace spoke again, his voice had lowered significantly. "That's a SOCOM identifier," he said carefully. "Special Operations Command, but the secondary code pattern isn't standard military. It's from Cerberus Tactical." Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Cerberus Tactical was a private military contractor with a reputation that ranged from questionable to outright notorious, depending on who you asked. They operated in legal grey areas, taking contracts the military couldn't officially touch, with standards that often prioritized results over ethics. "What would Cerberus be doing with military-grade puppies in Montana?" she asked, though a sickening suspicion was already forming. "They established a training facility about 80 miles northwest of you last year," Wallace replied. "Supposedly for security dogs, but rumor has it they're developing specialized tactical K9s for private clients, military contracts, foreign governments, that kind of thing. And if a puppy doesn't meet standards?" Wallace's silence was answer enough. "The wound on its shoulder," Alex continued, her voice hardening. "Clean edge, consistent depth. Knife, wound, not an accident." Jesus. Even over the staticky connection, his disgust was evident. They just discarded it. "Left it to die where wolves would finish the job and erase the evidence," Alex confirmed, her jaw tight. "I need to know what I'm dealing with medically. Specific breed issues, potential complications with the antibiotics I'm using." Wallace promised to make some calls and send the information to her satellite phone. "What are you planning to do with the puppy if it survives?" The question caught Alex off guard. She hadn't thought beyond the immediate crisis of keeping Phoenix alive. "I don't know. Find it a home, I guess." The words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "Alex," Wallace said carefully, using her first name in a rare break from military. "Formality. Be careful, Cerberus doesn't like loose ends. If they find out you rescued one of their throwaways—" "They won't," she said firmly. "No one knows I'm up here except you and my doctors, and the nearest neighbor is 12 miles away." After ending the call, Alex stood for a moment on the windswept ridge, looking out over the vast wilderness that had been both her refuge and prison these past months. The landscape stretched endlessly, peaks and valleys unmarked by human presence, beautiful and merciless. She had chosen this isolation deliberately, believing herself beyond repair, beyond purpose. Now, with the knowledge of Phoenix's origins churning in her mind, the isolation took on a different meaning. Not an ending, but perhaps a place of beginning. For both of them. The return journey to the cabin seemed faster, urgency lending strength to her tired muscles. As she approached the clearing, something made her slow her steps. A prickling awareness at the back of her neck, the sensation that had saved her life more than once in Afghanistan. She scanned the area methodically. Nothing seemed disturbed. No tracks besides her own led to or from the cabin. And yet, Alex unholstered the sidearm she'd carried since finding signs of wolf activity near her property weeks earlier. She approached the cabin cautiously, circling to check all sides before climbing the 3 steps to the porch. The door remained locked as she'd left it. Through the window, she could see Ranger still at his post beside Phoenix. Shaking off the feeling as combat-honed paranoia, she entered the cabin and was immediately met by Ranger's alert posture. The shepherd hadn't barked. His training was too sophisticated for that, but his ears were forward, his body tense. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, scanning the cabin's interior. Nothing seemed disturbed, and Phoenix remained where she'd left the puppy, apparently sleeping peacefully. Ranger moved to the window facing north, staring intently into the trees beyond the clearing. Alex joined him, eyes searching the tree line. For several long moments, she saw nothing. Then a flash of movement, so brief she might have imagined it. Not an animal, the distinctive silhouette of a person quickly disappearing into the dense forest. Alex's mind raced. Could be a hiker who'd gotten lost in the storm, seeking help. But hikers didn't typically venture into this remote area, especially not in December. And they certainly didn't hide when they spotted an occupied cabin. Wallace's warning echoed in her mind. Cerberus doesn't like loose ends. Impossible. No one could have tracked her from the ridge where she'd found Phoenix. The storm had erased all traces within hours, and even if someone from Cerberus had been searching for the discarded puppy, how would they know to look here? Yet the feeling persisted, that sixth sense honed through years in combat zones. Someone had been watching. Her cabin, perhaps still was. Alex moved with practiced efficiency, drawing the curtains over all windows and checking the locks on doors and gun cabinet. She retrieved her rifle from beside the door and laid it within easy reach, then turned her attention back to Phoenix. The puppy was awake now, amber eyes tracking her movements with surprising alertness given its condition. When Alex knelt beside the makeshift bed, Phoenix tried to raise its head. "Easy," she murmured, gently restraining the movement with a light touch. "You're not ready for that yet." Something in her tone must have conveyed her concern, because Ranger pressed against her side, his warm weight offering silent comfort. Alex hadn't realized how tense her body had become until she felt the shepherd's steadying presence. Her satellite phone buzzed, Wallace sending the promised information. The document contained details about Belgian Malinois medical considerations and confirmation of what she'd suspected. The tattoo identified Phoenix as part of a specialized breeding program focused on developing enhanced capabilities through selective breeding and early conditioning. The technical language couldn't disguise the disturbing reality. Puppies were evaluated at 12 weeks for specific behavioral and physical markers. Those that failed to meet benchmarks were removed from the program. The euphemism couldn't disguise what Alex had witnessed firsthand, a knife wound and abandonment in predator territory. More disturbing was the additional information Wallace had uncovered. The specific code in Phoenix's tattoo indicated the puppy had been part of a group designated for advanced stress response conditioning, a clinical term for systematic exposure to fear and pain designed to identify those with extraordinary resilience. Alex set down the phone, a cold fury building inside her. She'd seen the human cost of war up close, had carried that cost in her own body and mind, but there was something particularly reprehensible about subjecting an animal bred for loyalty and service to calculated cruelty, then discarding it when it failed to meet some arbitrary standard. Looking down at Phoenix, who had managed to shift position slightly to press against Ranger's paw where it rested near the edge of the bed, Alex made a decision. This puppy wouldn't be going anywhere. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. "You're staying with us," she told Phoenix quietly. "That's not up for debate." Adils, the puppy's ears twitched slightly at the sound of her voice, and those remarkable amber eyes held hers with an intensity that seemed beyond Phoenix's young age. In that gaze, Alex recognized something she'd seen in the eyes of soldiers who'd endured the unendurable, a determination forged through suffering, a will to survive that transcended mere instinct. As if understanding that a commitment had been made, Phoenix let out a soft sound, not quite a whimper, more like a sigh, and seemed to relax more deeply into the blankets. Alex checked the bandages again, relieved to find no fresh bleeding. The antibiotics appeared to be working. The fever hadn't worsened since morning, small victories, but significant ones. She prepared a mixture of water and the high-protein broth she kept for Ranger during harsh winter months, when his energy demands increased. To her relief, Phoenix managed to lap a small amount from a shallow dish when supported in a semi-upright position. The simple act of taking nourishment voluntarily represented a crucial step forward. "Good job, warrior," Alex encouraged softly. "Small steps." As darkness fell once more across the isolated cabin, Alex maintained her vigilance, but now with a dual focus, monitoring Phoenix's condition while remaining alert to any further signs of intrusion from outside. She positioned herself where she could see both the puppy and the main windows, her rifle within reach. The night passed without incident, but sleep eluded her. Instead, her mind circled through memories she'd spent months trying to bury, the ambush that had destroyed her unit, the endless surgeries that followed, the medal ceremony she'd attended in a wheelchair, still heavily medicated and detached from reality. They'd called her a hero. The battlefield decisions that had saved the remaining members of her team had earned her a Silver Star and commendation for extraordinary leadership under fire. What the reports didn't mention was how she'd screamed herself awake in the hospital, night after night, how she couldn't bear to look at the families of the soldiers who hadn't made it home, how the weight of surviving had become almost unbearable. She'd retreated to this cabin not for recovery, but for disappearance, to fade away quietly where her failure, for that was how she viewed her survival when others had died, wouldn't be a constant reminder to anyone else. Ranger had been her only connection to her former life, a silent companion who asked nothing and understood everything. Now, watching Phoenix fight for each breath, Alex recognized the mirror being held up to her. The puppy had been discarded after being deemed insufficient, much as she had discarded herself, retreating from a world she no longer felt worthy to inhabit. Yet Phoenix fought on, clinging to life with tenacious determination despite having every reason to surrender. "What makes you keep fighting?" she whispered to the sleeping puppy. "What do you know that I've forgotten?" Dawn's approach brought a subtle change in Phoenix's condition. The fever had broken during the night, and when Alex checked the wounds, she found the first signs of healthy healing beginning around the edges. The puppy managed to drink more broth and even consumed small pieces of the softened kibble Alex had prepared. Most encouraging was Phoenix's increased alertness. Though still too weak to stand, the puppy's eyes tracked movement across the room, ears pivoting toward sounds. When Ranger approached the bed, Phoenix's tail gave a single weak wag, the first voluntary movement beyond necessity. Alex allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The immediate crisis appeared to be passing, but Wallace's warning and the mysterious figure she'd glimpsed in the trees remained troubling unknowns. If someone from Cerberus was indeed tracking the puppy, they represented a threat she needed to prepare for. She spent the morning taking inventory of her supplies and securing the cabin's vulnerabilities. The remote location that had once represented her retreat from the world now served a tactical purpose: limited approaches, clear sightlines, defensible position. The soldier in her, dormant for so long, reawakened with calm efficiency. By Midday, she had established a perimeter alarm system using fishing line and tin cans, primitive but effective in alerting her to anyone approaching the cabin. She cleaned her weapons, positioned additional ammunition in strategic locations, and prepared emergency supplies in case they needed to evacuate quickly. Ranger sensed the shift in her demeanor, responding with the alert readiness of his military training. The shepherd moved between sentry positions at different windows, body language communicating his return to working status rather than merely companion. Phoenix watched these preparations from the makeshift bed, eyes following Alex's movements with growing recognition. When Alex paused near the puppy during her preparations, Phoenix struggled to raise her head, straining toward the human as if attempting to participate despite physical limitations. "Not yet," Alex told her gently, stroking the puppy's head. "Your job now is to heal. Let us handle security." As if understanding, Phoenix settled back, but maintained an alertness that mirrored Ranger's, a natural vigilance that spoke to the puppy's breeding and intuitive understanding of purpose, even at such a young age. That afternoon, Alex's sat phone buzzed again. Wallace had sent coordinates for the Cerberus facility, along with satellite imagery showing its layout. A note accompanied the data. "Thought you should know what you're potentially dealing with. These aren't people to take lightly." The facility was larger than Alex had anticipated, a compound of several buildings surrounded by high fencing, located in a remote valley about 70 miles northwest of her position. According to Wallace's intelligence, it housed approximately 30 adult dogs in various stages of training, with a breeding program that produced regular litters for evaluation and development. What troubled Alex most wasn't the size or sophistication of the operation, but its apparent connections. Wallace had included a partial list of visitors to the facility over the past year: government officials, military contractors, and representatives from foreign nations, including several with questionable human rights records. Whatever Cerberus was developing went beyond standard security dogs. They're weaponizing them, she murmured, scanning the documents. Specialized aggression triggers, enhanced endurance conditioning, extreme stress tolerance. The clinical language disguised a disturbing reality. These weren't service animals being trained. They were living weapons being engineered. And Phoenix, despite being deemed unsuitable for the program, still represented a significant investment. More importantly, the puppy was evidence of methods that would likely violate multiple animal welfare regulations if exposed publicly. Alex's military training had included understanding enemy psychology, knowing what motivated potential threats, and how far they might go to achieve objectives. She had no doubt that if Cerberus knew Phoenix had survived and been rescued, they would take action to eliminate the risk of exposure. The question was whether they knew. The figure she'd glimpsed could have been a hunter or hiker, despite the remote location. The storm might have genuinely erased any trace connecting her to the site where she'd found Phoenix. Perhaps they assumed the puppy was already dead, consumed by the wolves they'd left to finish their dirty work. As evening approached, Alex prepared dinner for herself and Ranger, then another small meal of softened kibble mixed with broth for Phoenix. The puppy ate with increasing enthusiasm, a promising sign of returning strength. Afterward, instead of immediately falling back into exhausted sleep, Phoenix remained alert, watching Alex and Ranger move around the cabin with evident interest. When Alex settled beside the makeshift bed for her nightly vigil, something unexpected happened. Phoenix struggled to rise, forelegs pushing against the blankets with trembling determination. "Hey, take it easy," Alex cautioned, moving to gently restrain the puppy. "You're nowhere near ready for that." But Phoenix persisted with a single-minded focus that reminded Alex powerfully of wounded soldiers she'd seen push beyond medical advice, driven by something deeper than physical limitation. Rather than force the puppy back down, Alex supported the small body carefully, allowing Phoenix to find a sitting position while ensuring no stress was placed on the injured shoulder. The effort clearly exhausted the puppy, but the accomplishment seemed to matter deeply. Phoenix sat upright for nearly a minute, amber eyes bright with what Alex could only interpret as satisfaction, before allowing herself to be lowered back to the blankets. "Stubborn as hell," Alex observed with reluctant admiration. "That's going to serve you well." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees surrounding the cabin. The weather report had predicted another system moving through overnight. Not as severe as the previous storm, but enough to cover any tracks and further isolate the cabin from potential threats. Alex secured the cabin for the night, checking her perimeter alarms one final time before settling in with her back against the wall, positioned to monitor both Phoenix and the main entrance. Ranger took up his position near the window, his body, language communicating continued vigilance despite the late hour. In the quiet darkness, Alex found her thoughts returning to the past she'd tried so hard to escape. The faces of her team members, Rodriguez with his constant jokes, Chen, who could disassemble and reassemble any weapon blindfolded, Martinez, who carried pictures of his 3 daughters in his helmet, all gone in a blinding flash and thunderous percussion that had left nothing but silence and smoke in its wake. She had led them into that valley, had made the call that positioned their vehicles precisely where the IEDs had been planted. The official report had absolved her of error, citing faulty intelligence and the unpredictable nature of asymmetric warfare. But in the private courtroom of her mind, the verdict had been different. Yet watching Phoenix, a creature who had been deemed expendable and discarded without ceremony, fight so determinedly to survive, had awakened something Alex had thought permanently extinguished, a flickering recognition that perhaps survival itself wasn't the failure she had deemed it to be, that continuing to exist when others had perished wasn't inherently a betrayal. "We're both living on borrowed time," she whispered to the puppy, who had drifted into sleep, but whose ears still twitched at the sound of her voice. "Maybe that means the time doesn't really belong to us. Maybe it belongs to those who didn't get any more of it." The thought settled over her with surprising weight. If her survival wasn't just a personal burden, but a responsibility to those who hadn't made it back, what did that mean for how she'd chosen to live since returning? Had retreating to this isolated cabin truly honored their sacrifice, or had it been another form of surrender? Phoenix stirred in sleep, a small whimpering sound escaping as the puppy's legs twitched in what might have been a dream. Instinctively, Alex reached out to offer comfort, her hand gently stroking the golden fur. The puppy quieted immediately at her touch, pressing closer to her hand with unconscious trust. That simple response, the immediate calming effect of connection, pierced something in Alex's carefully constructed isolation. For months, she had limited her human contact to brief, necessary interactions during supply runs to the nearest town, had convinced herself that solitude was what she needed, what she deserved. Yet, in just 2 days, this small, wounded creature had awakened protective instincts and emotional responses she'd thought permanently numbed, had given her a purpose beyond mere existence, not just in saving Phoenix's life, but potentially in standing against the organization that had so callously discarded a living being that failed to meet their specifications. As the wind continued, its mournful song around the cabin's eaves, Alex made a decision. Whether Cerberus knew of Phoenix's survival or not, whether they came looking or remained ignorant, she would not be returning the puppy to any shelter or rehoming program. Phoenix would stay with her and Ranger, forming a unit of 3 survivors, bound by more than circumstance. What that meant for her self-imposed exile, for the wall she'd built around herself both physically and emotionally, remained to be seen. But for the first time since being airlifted from that blood-soaked valley halfway around the world, Captain Alexandra Novak felt the faintest stirring of something that might, with time and nurturing, resemble hope. 3 days had passed since Alex had rescued Phoenix from the wolves. The December sun hung low in the Montana sky, casting long shadows across the cabin's interior as afternoon slowly surrendered to evening. In the warm glow of lamplight, a small miracle was unfolding on the wooden floor. Phoenix stood on trembling legs, determination evident in every line of the puppy's body. The wounds were healing well, the punctures from the wolf attack already scabbing over, and even the deeper knife wound on the shoulder showing healthy granulation. But standing required more than physical healing. It demanded courage to push through pain and weakness. "That's it," Alex encouraged quietly, kneeling a few feet away. "You've got this." Ranger lay nearby, his intelligent eyes fixed on the puppy, with what appeared to be encouragement. The older dog had taken on a mentoring role over the past days, demonstrating remarkable patience with the injured puppy, sometimes lying beside Phoenix's bed for hours, a solid, reassuring presence. Phoenix took one shaky step forward, then another. Each movement was clearly painful, but the puppy's focus never wavered from Alex. On the third step, Phoenix's injured leg buckled slightly, but she caught herself, refusing to fall. 4 more steps followed in succession, wobbly but determined, until she reached Alex's outstretched hand. "Extraordinary," Alex murmured, gently stroking Phoenix's head as the puppy pressed against her palm. "Most dogs wouldn't even try to walk with those injuries. You're something special." There was no exaggeration in her assessment. Phoenix's recovery was progressing at a rate that defied expectation. The puppy wasn't just surviving, she was fighting, to thrive with a determination that spoke to something beyond mere instinct. Over the past days, Alex had maintained her vigilance, scanning the perimeter of her property regularly and checking her makeshift alarms. No further signs of intrusion had appeared, and as the days passed without incident, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps the figure she'd glimpsed had indeed been a lost hiker or hunter, unrelated to Phoenix's origins. Wallace had called twice more, providing additional intelligence about Cerberus Tactical. The operation was even more concerning than initially believed, heavily funded, politically connected, and operating with minimal oversight. Their breeding program specifically targeted traits that most legitimate canine trainers would consider dangerous: heightened aggression, reduced social bonding, and extreme stress tolerance that bordered on inability to feel pain. "You sure you want to keep that puppy?" Wallace had asked during their last conversation. "Could be more than you bargained for down the line. Those genetics weren't selected for family friendliness." Alex had responded with uncharacteristic firmness. "Phoenix stays with me. Whatever they try to engineer, she's still just a puppy who deserves a chance." Now, watching Phoenix make her way back to her bed on still unsteady legs, Alex considered Wallace's warning. The puppy had been bred for specific traits, had undergone what the clinical documents called stress conditioning, before being discarded. Would those experiences manifest in problematic behaviors as Phoenix matured? Was Alex equipped to handle a dog potentially predisposed to aggression or instability? As if sensing her thoughts, Phoenix paused midway to her bed and turned to look back at Alex. Those amber eyes held a clarity and intelligence that continually surprised her. There was wariness there, certainly, the natural caution of a creature who had learned early that the world contained pain, but no malice, no aggression beyond the normal boundaries of canine behavior. "We'll figure it out together," Alexei promised softly. "One day at a time." She rose stiffly from her kneeling position, her injured leg protesting the movement after too long in one position. The surgical scars along her thigh and calf pulled uncomfortably as she stretched, a familiar reminder of her own unfinished healing. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Both she and Phoenix carried physical wounds that would eventually heal, leaving scars as reminders. Both also carried less visible damage, experiences that had shaped them in ways not immediately apparent. From the outside, the difference, Alex reflected, was that Phoenix fought against her circumstances with undiluted determination, while Alex had surrendered to hers, retreating from the world rather than finding a way to move forward within it. "Maybe I've been going about this all wrong," she murmured to Ranger, who had moved to her side. The shepherd tilted his head, ears forward in attentive response. "Maybe surviving isn't the failure I've made it out to be." The thought felt fragile, a tender green shoot pushing through hard-packed soil. For months, Alex had carried survival, and the burden, the weight of living when others had died, of breathing Montana air while her team lay in Arlington soil. She'd interpreted her continued existence as somehow dishonoring their sacrifice, as if by living she diminished the finality of their deaths. But watching Phoenix, a creature deemed unworthy of life, literally thrown away, fight so relentlessly to exist, to heal, to connect, it created a dissonance in Alex's carefully constructed narrative of guilt. If Phoenix's determination to survive was admirable rather than selfish, what did that say about Alex's own responsibility to the life she still possessed? These thoughts occupied her as she prepared dinner, a simple meal of venison stew from meat she'd hunted months earlier and preserved for the winter. The routine tasks of chopping vegetables and stirring the pot provided a meditative framework for her shifting perspective. She'd come to the mountains to disappear, convinced that the world had no further use for a broken soldier whose leadership had resulted in tragedy. But what if that assessment had been flawed from the beginning? What if surviving created an obligation not to withdraw, but to continue serving, differently perhaps than before, but with the same underlying commitment? As darkness settled around the isolated cabin, Alex found herself making plans for the first time in months. Phoenix would need proper veterinary care once stable enough to travel. That meant a trip to Whitefish, the nearest town with facilities capable of comprehensive treatment. It would be a risk, exposing both herself and the puppy to potential discovery, but a necessary one for Phoenix's long-term recovery. Beyond immediate medical needs, Phoenix would require proper training, not the brutal conditioning Cerberus had begun, but structured guidance that would help the puppy channel her natural intelligence and drive in positive directions. Alex's experience with military working dogs provided a foundation, but she recognized the need to adapt those methods for a dog recovering from trauma. Most significant was the realization that staying permanently isolated in the wilderness no longer seemed viable or desirable. Phoenix deserved socialization, exposure to various environments, opportunities to develop confidence beyond the confines of the cabin and surrounding forest. Providing those experiences meant Alex would need to re-engage with the world she'd been avoiding. The thought should have terrified her. For months, the mere idea of sustained interaction with others had triggered panic responses. Elevated heart rate, cold sweats, the overwhelming urge to retreat further into solitude. Now, plotting a careful reintegration for Phoenix's benefit, she found those physiological reactions notably absent. Instead, a cautious sense of purpose had begun to form. Not the driving clarity of her military career, but something more nuanced. A recognition that perhaps her experiences, even the traumatic ones, had equipped her with specific capabilities. Who better to rehabilitate a discarded military working dog than a discarded military working human? They spoke the same unspoken language of service, training, and trauma. As she settled onto the floor beside Phoenix's bed for their nightly routine of wound care, Alex noticed a subtle change in the puppy's demeanor. Where previously Phoenix had submitted to treatment with stoic endurance, tonight she actively participated, shifting position to provide better access to the shoulder wound, maintaining eye contact as if seeking to understand the process, rather than merely endure it. "You're a quick study," Alex observed, carefully applying fresh ointment to the healing laceration, figuring out that this helps even though it hurts a little. Phoenix maintained unwavering attention, those remarkable, Embrace following Alex's movements with an intelligence that seemed to transcend her young age. When the treatment finished, the puppy sighed deeply and pressed her head against Alex's hand in what could only be interpreted as deliberate gratitude. The simple gesture, this wounded creature reaching out to form connection despite every reason to distrust humans, struck Alex profoundly. She had withdrawn from human connection after her trauma, building walls between herself and potential support. Phoenix, despite experiencing deliberate cruelty at human hands, still sought. Relationships still offered trust. The contrast was both humbling and instructive. "You're braver than I've been," Alex admitted quietly, stroking the puppy's ears. "Maybe I could learn something from that." Later that night, after completing her security checks and settling beside the wood stove with her journal, Alex began writing for the first time in months. The journal had been her therapist's suggestion, a way to process experiences without the pressure of direct human interaction. She'd abandoned the practice shortly after arriving at the cabin, finding the exercise too painful, the emotions. It triggered too overwhelming. Now she wrote steadily for over an hour, not just about Phoenix and the immediate situation, but about her team, the ambush, the aftermath. The words didn't come easily, but they came, spilling onto the page, with increasing fluidity as barriers within her gradually yielded. She wrote about Rodriguez's laugh, Chen's meticulous attention to equipment, Martinez's daughters whose futures would unfold without their father's presence. She acknowledged her role in the decisions that had placed them in the valley where IEDs waited, but also, for the first time, allowed herself to consider that perhaps the official assessment had been correct. That incomplete intelligence and the brutal randomness of war, rather than personal failure, had been the determining factors. Most significantly, she began to articulate a possibility she'd previously rejected, that surviving created not guilt, but obligation, that perhaps the lives lost that day placed a responsibility on those who remained to live with meaning and purpose rather than self-imposed exile. The thoughts remained fragile, tentative explorations rather than firm conclusions. But the simple act of engaging with them, of allowing them space in her consciousness after months of rigid avoidance, represented a profound shift. When she finally closed the journal near midnight, exhaustion draped heavily across her shoulders. Not just physical fatigue from days of vigilant care, but the deeper weariness that follows emotional excavation. Yet beneath the tiredness lay something else, a gossamer thread of lightness, the faintest suggestion of a burden beginning to shift. Sleep claimed her quickly that night, deeper and more restful than she had experienced in months. No nightmares tore her from unconsciousness. No sudden sensory memories of explosion and chaos jarred her awake. Just darkness and rest, her body finally surrendering to the healing it had long required. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity, sunlight refracting through frost-covered windows to cast prismatic patterns across the cabin's wooden floor. Alex woke feeling oddly refreshed, the lingering effects of emotional release and uninterrupted, sleep creating a subtle but unmistakable shift in perception. She completed her morning routine with methodical precision, checking perimeter alarms, scanning the surrounding forest for signs of intrusion, assessing Phoenix's wounds for any concerning changes. The familiar sequence of actions felt different, somehow infused with renewed purpose rather than mere habit. Phoenix greeted the day with matching energy, attempting to stand the moment Alex approached her bed. The improvement from yesterday was immediately apparent. More stability in her stance, less trembling in her injured leg. When Alex opened the cabin door to let Ranger out for his morning patrol, Phoenix took several determined steps toward the threshold, clearly intent on joining him. "Whoa there, ambitious," Alex said, gently intercepting the puppy. "You're not ready for outdoor adventures just yet." The disappointment in Phoenix's posture was almost comically evident, ears drooping, head lowering in resignation. But the puppy didn't fight Alex's restraint, instead returning to her bed with reluctant compliance. The balance of determination and self-control impressed Alex. Most puppies this age operated primarily on impulse. Phoenix already demonstrated remarkable restraint. "Tell you what," Alex offered, kneeling beside the bed. "If your wounds look good this evening, we'll try a very short supervised excursion tomorrow. Just around the immediate clearing, no adventures." Phoenix's ears immediately pricked forward, head tilting in a gesture so human-like in its hopefulness that Alex couldn't help smiling. The puppy's remarkable responsiveness to human communication continued to surprise her. Most dogs understood, in tone and basic commands, but Phoenix seemed to comprehend nuance, to extract meaning from complex verbal exchanges in a way that exceeded normal canine ability. Another result of Cerberus's selective breeding? The documents Wallace had sent mentioned enhanced human interaction capabilities as one of the program's objectives. The scientific language obscured a disturbing reality. They were attempting to engineer dogs with intelligence and responsiveness that pushed the boundaries of the species' natural capabilities. Yet watching Phoenix's eager response, Alex couldn't bring herself to view these traits as unnatural or concerning. Whatever Cerberus had attempted through selective breeding and conditioning, the result wasn't a weapon or a tool, but a sentient being with extraordinary capacity for connection and understanding. Their failure to recognize that reality revealed more about their own moral limitations than about Phoenix's value. After breakfast, during which Phoenix managed to eat a full portion of softened kibble mixed with broth while maintaining a sitting position, Alex decided to begin the first steps of rehabilitation. Drawing on her experience with injured, military working dogs, she designed a simple protocol that would strengthen Phoenix's healing muscles without risking the wound sites. "Let's start with some very gentle range of motion," she explained to the attentive puppy, carefully supporting the small body while guiding the injured leg through limited extension and flexion. Phoenix remained completely cooperative, seeming to understand the therapeutic intent behind movements that must have caused discomfort. After completing the gentle exercises, Alex introduced a simple training element, using small pieces of kibble to reward Phoenix for maintaining a sitting position, then a standing position for gradually increasing periods. The puppy's focus was absolute, her intelligence evident in how quickly she grasped the connection between specific postures and rewards. "You're going to be extraordinary once you're healed," Alex told her, unable to suppress admiration at the puppy's combination of physical determination and cognitive sharpness. "Whatever they thought was wrong with you, they missed something much more important." Phoenix responded by placing one paw carefully on Alex's knee, maintaining deliberate eye contact, a gesture that seemed to transcend normal canine communication, reaching for something deeper. In that moment of connection, Alex felt a shift in her perception of their relationship. This wasn't just a rescue operation or rehabilitation project. This was partnership forming, two damaged warriors recognizing something essential in each other. The realization both comforted and unsettled her. Comfort came from the natural rightness of their developing bond, unease from the responsibility it entailed, Alex had deliberately isolated herself precisely to avoid such connections, convinced that her capacity for meaningful relationship had been buried with her team in that Afghan valley. Yet here she was, forming an attachment that already ran deeper than she'd allowed herself to experience in months. More significantly, she was making plans that extended beyond immediate survival: training protocols, veterinary visits, potential reintegration strategies. The future had begun to exist again in her consciousness, no longer an empty void to be endured, but a space containing possibilities. That afternoon, as weak winter sunlight filtered through the windows, Alex made a decision. She retrieved her satellite phone and dialed a number she'd avoided for longer than any other. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Dr. Harrison?" Alex swallowed hard before responding. "It's Novak, Alexandra Novak." The silence that followed contained volumes: surprise, concern, perhaps a touch of professional satisfaction that a patient who had effectively disappeared had finally made contact. "Captain Novak," Harrison finally said, her tone carefully neutral. "It's good to hear from you. It's been a while." 7 months, to be exact, since Alex had abruptly terminated her therapy sessions and retreated to the mountains. Harrison had made multiple attempts to maintain contact in the early months, leaving messages that Alex had acknowledged but never substantially responded to. "I know," Alex replied, finding the words more difficult than anticipated. I wanted to check in, to let you know I'm okay." "I'm very glad to hear that," Harrison said, her professional composure not quite masking genuine relief. "Are you still at the cabin?" "Yes, but things have changed." Alex glanced toward Phoenix, who was watching the conversation with evident interest from her bed near the stove. "I've found something. Someone. A purpose, maybe." Over the next 20 minutes, Alex explained the situation: finding Phoenix, learning about Cerberus, the developing rehabilitation plan. She omitted certain details, particularly those relating to potential security concerns, but shared enough for Harrison to understand the significance of these developments. The therapist listened without interruption, asking clarifying questions only when Alex's narrative faltered. When the explanation concluded, Harrison responded with characteristic thoughtfulness. "It sounds like this puppy has become a catalyst for some important reconsiderations," she observed. "The rehabilitation you're describing for Phoenix parallels much of what we discussed for your own recovery: gradual exposure, rebuilding strength, re-establishing trust and connection." "The irony hasn't escaped me," Alex acknowledged, with a rueful smile that felt unfamiliar on her face after months of emotional flatness. "Apparently, I can recognize healthy recovery patterns for everyone except myself." "Perhaps having external focus makes those patterns more accessible," Harrison suggested. "Many trauma survivors find it easier to extend care and compassion to others than to themselves. The challenge becomes translating those same principles to one's own healing." The observation struck uncomfortably close to truth. Alex had thrown herself into Phoenix's recovery with energy and determination she hadn't applied to her own situation in months. The puppy's needs had somehow bypassed barriers she'd established against her own healing, creating pathways to engagement she'd previously rejected. "I think I'm ready," Alex said after a long moment, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "Not for everything at once, but to start working with you again. Maybe remotely at first, until you're ready for more," Harrison completed gently. "That sounds like an excellent beginning, Captain. Shall we schedule a video session for later this week?" They arranged a time, discussed technical requirements, addressed preliminary goals. The conversation remained professional, focused on logistics rather than diving immediately into emotional terrain. Harrison had always understood Alex's need for structure and clear parameters, especially when navigating vulnerable territory. As Alex ended the call, she felt a curious mixture of anxiety and relief. The prospect of reopening carefully sealed emotional compartments created understandable apprehension. Yet alongside the fear ran a thin current of something like anticipation. The recognition that stagnation, however safe it might feel, offered no path forward. Phoenix had managed to cross the room during the phone conversation, making her way slowly but steadily to position herself beside Alex's chair. Now she pressed gently against Alex's leg, offering silent support as if somehow understanding the significance of the call that had just concluded. "Baby steps for both of us," Alex told the puppy, stroking her ears. "One day at a time." Outside, the short winter afternoon was already surrendering to evening, shadows lengthening across the snow-covered clearing. Alex completed her security checks with practiced efficiency, finding no signs of disturbance in the pristine snow surrounding the cabin. The isolation that had once represented retreat now provided tactical advantage. Any approach would leave visible evidence, any intrusion easily detected in this environment of clean white canvas and silent forest. As darkness settled fully across the mountains, Alex built up the fire in the wood stove, prepared dinner, and settled into the evening routine that had quickly developed around Phoenix's care. The puppy's increasing strength meant more complex physical therapy was now possible. Gentle resistance exercises, more sustained periods of standing and controlled movement, even short training sessions that engaged her evident cognitive abilities. Throughout these activities, Alex found herself talking more than she had in months. She explained procedures as she performed them, narrated her thought process during training, even shared elements of her military experience that connected to working dog protocols. Phoenix listened with unwavering attention, those remarkable, amber eyes tracking every movement, ears adjusting to capture each word. "You're a better therapist than my actual therapist," Alex remarked as she carefully stretched Phoenix's healing leg. "You don't charge by the hour, and you never look disappointed." When I changed the subject, the puppy responded by gently mouthing Alex's hand. Not a bite, just the softest connection of teeth to skin, a gesture of affection and acknowledgement. The simple interaction crystallized something Alex had been gradually recognizing over the past days. Phoenix wasn't just a recipient of care, but an active participant in a developing relationship of mutual support. That night, after completing her journal entry, another step in rebuilding practices she'd abandoned, Alex made a decision that signified more than its simple physical reality. Instead of sleeping on her cot, positioned strategically near both the door and Phoenix's bed, she moved her sleeping bag directly beside the puppy's makeshift bed, creating a shared space rather than a monitored one. "Time for an upgrade in sleeping arrangements," she told Phoenix, who watched the preparations with evident interest. "Ranger, you too. Everyone together tonight." The shepherd needed no further invitation, settling into his customary sleeping position at Alex's feet. Phoenix, however, surprised her by slowly standing and making her way to the edge of her own bed, then deliberately stepping over the boundary to position herself directly against Alex's side once she had settled into the sleeping bag. For a moment, Alex tensed at the unexpected proximity. Physical closeness had become foreign during her months of isolation, even simple touch a rarity beyond necessary medical examinations. But Phoenix's warm weight against her side, the gentle rhythm of the puppy's breathing, created a comfort that gradually unwound the instinctive tension. "Okay then," she murmured, cautiously extending an arm to encircle the small body. "This works too." As the cabin creaked softly in the mountain night, snow beginning to fall outside the frost-covered windows, three survivors shared warmth and protection a unit formed not by design, but by the mysterious workings of circumstance and choice. Something was healing in that small shelter that went beyond physical wounds, though none of them could have named it precisely. For the first time since the explosion that had torn her world apart, Captain Alexandra Novak fell asleep with her arms around another living being. The simple comfort of connection beginning to weave closed a wound far deeper than any shrapnel had created. And Phoenix, the discarded puppy deemed unworthy of life, kept vigilant watch from within that embrace, her amber eyes reflecting firelight before finally closing in well-earned rest. The first morning light filtered through frost-covered windows, casting ethereal patterns across the cabin floor. Alex woke to find Phoenix already awake, watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. The puppy had maintained her position pressed against Alex's side throughout the night, as if understanding that her presence provided comfort beyond the purely physical warmth. "Morning, warrior," Alex murmured, reaching out to gently stroke Phoenix's head. "How are you feeling today?" In response, Phoenix carefully rose to her feet, testing her injured leg with cautious movements. The improvement from yesterday was immediately evident: more stability, less hesitation, a growing confidence in her own recovering body. When she took several experimental steps around the sleeping bag, her gait showed only slight unevenness. "Looking good," Alex observed, pushing herself up to sitting position. "If this keeps up, we might try that outdoor excursion I promised." Ranger had already moved to his usual morning position by the door, his routine unaltered despite the changed sleeping arrangements. The shepherd's calm presence had been a stabilizing force for both Alex and Phoenix, his steady temperament and unflappable demeanor creating a foundation of security that allowed Phoenix's more vulnerable healing and Alex's tentative emotional re-engagement. As Alex completed her morning routine, checking perimeter alarms, scanning the surrounding forest, preparing breakfast for all three of them, she found herself making plans with a clarity and purpose that had been absent for months. Phoenix's recovery had progressed to a point where professional veterinary assessment was becoming necessary. The wounds were healing well under Alex's care, but proper examination would ensure no underlying issues remained unaddressed. That meant a journey to Whitefish, the nearest town with comprehensive veterinary services. The prospect of leaving her isolated sanctuary created a flutter of anxiety in Alex's chest, but she pushed through it with newfound determination. Phoenix's needs outweighed her own reluctance to re-engage with the world. After breakfast, Alex retrieved her rarely used laptop and connected to the satellite internet service she maintained for emergencies. The connection was expensive and limited, another deliberate choice in her pursuit of isolation. Now she used the precious bandwidth to research veterinary options in Whitefish, looking specifically for clinics with experience handling working dogs. Alpine Veterinary Partners appeared most promising. Their staff included a former military veterinarian who specialized in service and working dogs. According to their website, Dr. Eleanor Chen had served 2 tours with Army Veterinary Corps. Before transitioning to civilian practice, the military connection might prove valuable given Phoenix's origins and potential complications. Alex composed a carefully worded email explaining the situation. A rescued Belgian Malinois puppy with healing wounds requiring professional assessment. She omitted details about Cerberus and the suspicious circumstances, presenting Phoenix simply as a stray she had found injured. Better to assess the situation in person before sharing potentially sensitive information. With the appointment request sent, Alex turned her attention to preparation for the journey. Whitefish lay about 40 miles from her cabin, normally a straightforward drive, but winter conditions in the mountains complicated matters. Her truck, parked under a protective shelter near the cabin, hadn't been started in nearly 3 weeks. She would need to ensure it was operational, pack emergency supplies, and plan the timing carefully around weather conditions. Most importantly, she needed to prepare Phoenix for the journey. The puppy had shown remarkable resilience and adaptability, but travel would introduce multiple new stresses: vehicle motion, unfamiliar environments, strangers handling her. Given Phoenix's history of mistreatment and abandonment, these experiences could potentially trigger fear responses or setbacks in her recovery. "We need to start getting you ready for a little adventure," Alex told Phoenix as she knelt beside her. Nothing too challenging at first, just some small steps. The first of those steps would be venturing outside the cabin, Phoenix's first time beyond its walls since her rescue. As promised the previous day, Alex prepared for a brief, controlled excursion into the immediate clearing surrounding the cabin. She fashioned a makeshift harness from soft material that would support Phoenix without putting pressure on her healing wounds, allowing Alex to provide stability if the puppy's strength faltered. "Ready to see your kingdom?" Alex asked carefully, fitting the harness around Phoenix's small body. The puppy's excitement was evident, ears forward, eyes bright, body quivering with anticipation rather than weakness. Ranger led the way as Alex opened the door, the shepherd performing his usual security sweep of the immediate area before returning to signal all clear. The morning air was crystalline in its clarity, the temperature well below freezing, but without wind to add bitter chill. Fresh snow from the night before blanketed everything in pristine white, unmarked except for Ranger's tracks. Alex lifted Phoenix carefully over the threshold, then set her down gently on the packed snow of the small porch. The puppy froze momentarily, overwhelmed by the sensory input, the vast openness after days confined to the cabin interior, the brightness of sunlight on snow, the complex symphony of forest scents carried on the cold air. Then, as if making a conscious decision to embrace this new experience, Phoenix took a deliberate step forward. Her paws crunched in the snow, leaving tiny, perfect prints beside Ranger's larger tracks. She sniffed intently at the air, ears swiveling, to capture distant sounds, inaudible to human perception. "That's it," Alex encouraged softly, keeping the support harness loose enough to allow freedom of movement while remaining ready to provide assistance if needed. "Take your time. It's all yours to explore." Phoenix moved with increasing confidence, investigating the immediate area around the porch with methodical curiosity. When she reached the edge where deeper snow began, she paused, assessing the challenge. Then, with characteristic determination, she plunged forward, partially bounding, partially swimming through snow that reached nearly to her shoulders in places. Alex couldn't suppress her laughter at the sight, this small golden creature diving into snow with such wholehearted commitment, disappearing momentarily before reappearing with a snow-covered muzzle and bright eyes. For a puppy who had faced death multiple times in her short life, Phoenix approached this new adventure with remarkable joy and fearlessness. Ranger joined the exploration, his larger body creating paths through deeper snow that Phoenix gratefully followed. The shepherd seemed to understand his role in this excursion, staying close enough to provide assistance, but allowing the puppy space for independent discovery. "Look at you," Alex murmured, watching Phoenix navigate her surroundings. With growing confidence, "Not even a week ago you were barely breathing, and now you're conquering mountains." After about 15 minutes, Alex noticed the first signs of fatigue, a slight increase in Phoenix's limp, marginally slower movements. Before the puppy could overexert herself, Alex gently guided her back toward the cabin, using the harness to provide support up the porch steps. Once inside, Phoenix collapsed onto her bed with evident exhaustion, but equally evident satisfaction. Her eyes remained bright, her posture conveying accomplishment rather than defeat. This short journey outside represented significant progress. Not just in physical healing, but in psychological resilience. A puppy with traumatic experiences might easily have responded to new environments with fear or anxiety. Phoenix had shown curiosity and adaptability. "You're going to do just fine on our trip to town," Alex told her, kneeling to check that the excursion hadn't aggravated any wounds. All remained securely closed, the healing tissues undisturbed by the moderate activity. As Phoenix rested, Alex continued preparations for their journey. She ventured to the storage shed where her truck waited, clearing accumulated snow and checking systems methodically. The battery had maintained sufficient charge thanks to the solar trickle charger she'd installed months earlier, and after some initial reluctance, the engine rumbled to life, quickly settling into steady operation. Returning to the cabin, she found an email response from Alpine Veterinary Partners already waiting. Dr. Chen could see Phoenix tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. The quick response and specific assignment to the military experienced veterinarian suggested they had recognized potential significance in the case beyond routine care. Alex spent the remainder of the day alternating between practical journey preparations and continued rehabilitation exercises with Phoenix. The puppy's strength continued to improve, each session showing incremental progress in stability, endurance, and coordination. By evening, Phoenix was moving around the cabin with only occasional hesitation on her injured leg. Remarkable recovery by any standard, but particularly impressive given the severity of her initial wounds. As darkness fell across the mountains, Alex found herself experiencing an unfamiliar emotion as she contemplated the journey ahead. Beneath the expected anxiety about leaving her sanctuary lay something that felt suspiciously like anticipation, a muted eagerness to move beyond the self-imposed boundaries that had defined her existence for months. This realization prompted her to take a step she'd been considering since beginning Phoenix's rehabilitation. She retrieved her satellite phone and dialed Wallace again. "Twice in 1 week," he answered after the second ring. "I'm starting to think you miss civilization, Novak." "Don't get too excited," she replied, surprising herself with the hint of humor in her tone. "I'm calling about Phoenix. We're making a trip to town tomorrow. Veterinary appointment." "Whitefish?" Wallace asked, immediately grasping the security implications. "Yes, Alpine Veterinary, Dr. Chen, former Army Vet Corps." "I know her," Wallace confirmed. "Solid, trustworthy, good choice." Alex hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding Cerberus, the risk factors if they discover Phoenix survived. And I'm not living in fear of them," she said firmly. "Phoenix needs proper care, which means trips to town, which means potential exposure. I need to be prepared rather than paranoid." Wallace's approval was evident in his tone. "Now that sounds like the Captain Novak I remember. What do you need from me? Information on Cerberus personnel who might be in the area, facility schedules, vehicle descriptions, known operatives, anything that would help me identify potential surveillance or threats before they become active problems." "I can get you something by morning," Wallace promised. "Basic identification package. And Alex..." He paused. "It's good to hear you thinking tactically again, planning ahead instead of just reacting." The observation struck Alex as more significant than Wallace likely intended. For months, she had indeed been merely reacting to trauma, to loss, to her own damaged sense of identity. Finding Phoenix had catalyzed a shift from passive endurance to active engagement with both present circumstances and future possibilities. After ending the call, Alex returned to where Phoenix lay, watching her from the bed near the wood stove. The puppy's attentive gaze held such focused intelligence that Alex sometimes found herself forgetting how young Phoenix actually was. Still very much a puppy despite her extraordinary maturity in certain aspects. "Big day tomorrow," she told Phoenix, settling beside her. "First venture into civilization for both of us in quite a while." Phoenix responded by pressing closer, her warm weight against Alex's side, now familiar and comforting. This physical connection, the simple sharing of space and touch, had become integral to both their healing processes, bridging gaps that words alone couldn't span. Alex slept fitfully that night, her dreams a kaleidoscope of past and present, fragments of Afghanistan interspersed with wolves circling in snow, faceless Cerberus operators searching mountain passes, Phoenix running through sunlit meadows. With impossible speed, she woke before dawn, the lingering images leaving her restless but determined. The journey preparations continued with methodical efficiency, loading emergency supplies into the truck, creating a comfortable and secure traveling space for Phoenix, checking weather reports and road conditions. By mid-morning, everything was ready except Alex herself, who found the prospect of leaving her sanctuary increasingly daunting as departure time approached. Phoenix, conversely, appeared eager for the new adventure. The puppy watched the preparations, with evident interest, responding to the travel harness with cooperative stillness rather than resistance. When Alex finally carried her to the truck and settled her in the specially prepared area on the passenger seat, Phoenix immediately oriented herself to watch through the windshield, ears forward in anticipation. "At least one of us is excited," Alex murmured, securing herself in the driver's seat. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel, a physical manifestation of the anxiety she'd been suppressing throughout the morning. Ranger settled in the back seat, his calm presence providing silent reassurance. The first mile was the hardest, watching her cabin disappear in the rearview mirror, the protective isolation of her chosen refuge giving way to the uncertainty of the outside world. Alex's breathing quickened, her heart rate accelerating, as familiar panic responses threatened to overwhelm her. "Focus on the mission," she told herself firmly, employing the tactical mindset that had served her through countless high-stress situations in combat zones. Phoenix needs this. Everything else is secondary. Framing the journey in mission parameters helped. Alex's attention shifted from her own discomfort to the specific objectives ahead. Safe transit to Whitefish, successful veterinary assessment, secure return to the cabin, manageable steps with clear purpose. The mountain roads were challenging, but navigable, her truck's four-wheel drive handling the snow-packed surfaces with reliable traction. As they descended from the higher elevations, conditions improved, the landscape gradually transitioning from isolated wilderness to occasional evidence of human presence, distant cabins, logging roads, highway maintenance vehicles. Phoenix observed everything with rapt attention, her amber eyes tracking movement outside the windows, ears adjusting to capture new sounds. Occasionally, she would turn to look at Alex, as if checking that this new experience remained safe and approved. Each time, Alex offered reassurance with a gentle touch or quiet word. As they approached the outskirts of Whitefish, Alex activated the secure tablet Wallace had sent to her satellite feed that morning. The device contained the promised identification package, photographs of known Cerberus personnel, vehicle descriptions, facility schedules, and regional operational patterns. According to the intelligence, midweek activity typically centered around the main facility with minimal personnel movement in surrounding communities. This information provided moderate reassurance. The chances of random encounter with Cerberus operatives in Whitefish on a Wednesday afternoon were relatively low. Nevertheless, Alex resolved to maintain heightened awareness throughout their time in town, treating this as a tactical operation rather than a routine veterinary visit. Whitefish itself appeared through the windshield, a picturesque mountain, town decorated for the holiday season, streets lined with snow-covered trees adorned with twinkling lights. Under different circumstances, Alex might have appreciated its postcard beauty, but today her focus remained sharply practical, assessing potential security concerns rather than aesthetic qualities. She located Alpine Veterinary Partners easily. The modern single-story building set slightly apart from the main commercial district. Its parking lot was less than half full, another positive sign for maintaining low visibility during their visit. Alex pulled into a space, offering clear sightlines to surrounding areas while providing quick access to exit routes if needed. "Almost there," she told Phoenix, who had become increasingly alert as they entered the town environment. The puppy showed no signs of stress despite the multitude of new sensory inputs: traffic sounds, unfamiliar scents, the distant voices of strangers. This adaptability further confirmed Alex's assessment of Phoenix's extraordinary temperament and intelligence. Before exiting the vehicle, Alex performed a final security scan of the surroundings, confirming absence of vehicles, matching Cerberus descriptions, and noting all potential entry-exit points from the veterinary clinic. Satisfied that immediate threats were minimal, she retrieved Phoenix's travel harness and prepared for the short walk to the entrance. "Remember," she told Phoenix as she carefully lifted her from the seat, "these are friendly people who want to help you. But if anything feels wrong, you let me know." Phoenix responded with unwavering attention, her body relaxed in Alex's arms despite the novel environment. Ranger flanked them as they approached the clinic entrance, the shepherd maintaining alert, watchfulness without displaying tension that might trigger concern in others. The reception area was warmly lit and moderately busy. 2 other clients with pets waited in the comfortable seating area, while a receptionist worked behind a curved desk adorned with holiday decorations. Alex noted security cameras discreetly positioned near entrance points, automatic doors that could be remotely locked, and clear sightlines throughout the space, all positive features from a tactical perspective. The receptionist looked up. As they entered, her professional smile warming with genuine interest as she noticed Phoenix. "You must be Captain Novak with Phoenix," she greeted them. "Dr. Chen mentioned you were coming in today. She's very interested in meeting this little one." Alex hadn't included her military rank in the appointment request email. The receptionist's use of her title suggested Dr. Chen had already made connections based on the limited information provided, perhaps recognizing Alex's name from military circles or speculating based on the description of Phoenix's condition. "That's us," Alex confirmed, maintaining casual demeanor while inwardly adjusting her assessment of the situation. Not necessarily concerning, but noteworthy. "If you'll just fill out these intake forms, Dr. Chen actually asked to see you as soon as you arrived rather than having you wait," the receptionist explained, sliding a tablet across the counter. She had a cancellation, so her schedule opened up. This deviation from standard procedure triggered Alex's heightened awareness. Preferential treatment could simply indicate professional courtesy from one veteran to another, or genuine medical interest in Phoenix's case. It could also mean something else entirely. As Alex completed the digital forms with intentionally vague information about Phoenix's origins, a door opened from the interior hallway. A woman in her early 40s, with short-cropped dark hair and the poised bearing that often marked military veterans, approached directly. "Captain Novak," she said without preamble, extending her hand. "Dr. Eleanor Chen, thank you for bringing this little one in. From your description, she sounds like a very special case. The directness, the confidence of approach, the subtle assessment in her gaze, all marked Dr. Chen as military-trained." Alex accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip and steady eye contact that communicated professional respect rather than challenge. "Thank you for seeing us quickly," Alex responded, maintaining matched directness. "Phoenix has made remarkable progress, but I wanted expert assessment before we continue rehabilitation." Dr. Chen's attention shifted to Phoenix, her clinical gaze assessing the puppy with practiced efficiency. Belgian Malinois, approximately 16 weeks, evidence of significant trauma with remarkable recovery progression, she observed. Then, noticing the partially visible tattoo on Phoenix's inner thigh, her expression shifted subtly. Let's continue this conversation in exam room 3. More privacy there. As they followed Dr. Chen down the hallway, Alex's tactical awareness remained heightened. The veterinarian's recognition of the tattoo's significance suggested deeper knowledge than a typical civilian practitioner might possess. Whether that represented an asset or potential complication remained to be determined. Exam room 3 proved to be larger than standard, equipped with advanced diagnostic equipment and notably lacking windows, a more secure space than the alternatives. Dr. Chen closed the door firmly behind them before turning to face Alex directly. Before we proceed with examination, I think we need to establish some parameters, she said, her tone shifting from professional courtesy to something more serious. That tattoo identifier belongs to a program I'm familiar with from my military service, a program with significant ethical concerns that prompted my transition to civilian practice. Alex maintained neutral expression while inwardly re-evaluating the situation. You're familiar with Cerberus Tactical? Unfortunately, yes. Dr. Chen's expression hardened momentarily before returning to professional composure. During my second tour, I was assigned temporary duty with a joint task force evaluating military working dog programs, including private contractors. What I witnessed at Cerberus facilities violated every standard of ethical animal treatment I was trained to uphold. The declaration represented a calculated risk on Dr. Chen's part, revealing potentially sensitive information to establish trust. Alex considered her response carefully before deciding on matched disclosure. Phoenix was found abandoned in the wilderness near my property, deliberately wounded and left for predators, she explained, watching Dr. Chen's reaction closely. Based on intelligence from reliable sources, she was deemed unsuitable for their program, despite months of what they call advanced stress response conditioning. Dr. Chen's expression reflected professional outrage, tempered by clinical focus. May I? She asked, gesturing toward Phoenix. At Alex's nod, she approached, slowly, speaking softly to the puppy before beginning gentle examination. The rehabilitation you've managed so far is impressive, she commented after several minutes of thorough assessment. The shoulder wound is healing remarkably well, considering what I suspect was its original severity. You have medical training. Do combat medic certification and field experience, Alex confirmed, plus specific training with injured working dogs during my service. Dr. Chen nodded, continuing her examination with methodical precision. Her physical recovery is progressing excellently. I'd like to run some additional diagnostics to check for any hidden complications, blood work, detailed imaging of the shoulder, neurological assessment. The thoroughness of the proposed evaluation exceeded standard protocol for a rescue puppy, suggesting Dr. Chen recognized the potential significance of Phoenix's case beyond immediate medical concerns. There's something else you should know, Alex said, making another calculated decision to extend trust. Based on intelligence about Cerberus operations, there's reason to believe they might have interest in recovering Phoenix if they discovered she survived. Her existence represents potential evidence of unethical practices and program failures. Rather than expressing surprise or concern, Dr. Chen simply nodded. I suspected as much given the specific identifier sequence. Their advanced stress response conditioning program has been particularly secretive, with minimal documentation reaching official channels. A living subject with physical evidence of their methods would indeed represent significant risk from their perspective. This matter-of-fact assessment confirmed Alex's initial impression of Dr. Chen as someone with deeper understanding of the situation than her civilian veterinary position might suggest. The doctor continued her examination while speaking. "Captain, I believe Phoenix represents more than just a rescued puppy in need of medical care. She potentially constitutes evidence of practices that violate multiple federal regulations regarding animal welfare in government-adjacent programs." She paused, meeting Alex's gaze directly. "I have connections with oversight committees that have been attempting to investigate Cerberus for years with limited success. Phoenix could change that equation significantly." The implication was clear. Dr. Chen was suggesting that Phoenix's case could have broader implications beyond individual rescue, that her existence could potentially contribute to accountability for an organization operating outside ethical boundaries. "My current priority is ensuring her complete recovery," Alex responded carefully. "Any considerations beyond that need to guarantee her safety and well-being above all other objectives." Dr. Chen nodded with evident approval. "As it should be, my recommendation is that we complete thorough documentation of her injuries, condition, and the tattoo identifier while providing complete medical care. This creates a secured evidence record without any immediate action that might place her at risk. Future decisions regarding that evidence remain entirely at your discretion." The approach represented a reasonable compromise, creating potential for accountability while maintaining Alex's autonomy in determining Phoenix's path forward. It acknowledged both the broader ethical implications and the immediate welfare priorities. "I can work with that," Alex agreed, "provided all records remain secured and confidential for now." "Absolutely," Dr. Chen confirmed. "I'll handle everything. Personally, with documentation secured under medical privacy protocols. No information enters standard systems where it might trigger automated alerts." This level of discretion further suggested Dr. Chen's deeper understanding of potential security concerns. Her willingness to maintain confidentiality while still creating properly documented evidence spoke to a carefully considered ethical position. The remainder of the appointment proceeded with comprehensive diagnostic procedures, blood samples collected, detailed imaging of healing wounds, thorough neurological assessment. Throughout these procedures, Phoenix maintained remarkable composure, cooperating with minimal restraint required despite the unfamiliar hands and equipment. "Her temperament is extraordinary," Dr. Chen observed as she completed the final assessment. "Most puppies with her history of trauma would show significant fear responses or aggression during examination by strangers. Her trust in you is evident, but she's also demonstrating inherent stability beyond what environmental factors could create." The irony being that this same temperament probably contributed to her being deemed unsuitable for Cerberus purposes, Alex noted with bitter understanding. They weren't looking for emotional stability or capacity for trust. They wanted reactive aggression and minimal social bonding. "Precisely," Dr. Chen agreed, her expression reflecting professional disgust. "They're attempting to engineer living weapons rather than working partners." Phoenix's natural intelligence and emotional capacity made her unsuitable for their purposes, but ideal for legitimate service work. She has exceptional potential. This assessment aligned with Alex's own observations of Phoenix's remarkable capabilities. The puppy's combination of intelligence, resilience, and capacity for trust, despite traumatic experiences, marked her as truly extraordinary. Not because of Cerberus's manipulations, but despite them. As Dr. Chen completed her documentation and provided detailed care instructions, she hesitated before offering a final observation. "Captain Novak, I hope you don't find this presumptuous, but Phoenix isn't the only one showing remarkable recovery capacity. Your handling of this situation, the medical care you've provided, the rehabilitation approach, even your security awareness, reflects exceptional resilience." The unexpected personal comment caught Alex off guard. For months, she had defined herself primarily by what she had lost: capability, confidence, purpose. Dr. Chen's observation suggested an external perspective that recognized continuing strengths rather than focusing on damage. "Just doing what needs to be done," Alex responded automatically, deflecting as she had habitually done when facing acknowledgement of her abilities after returning from Afghanistan. "Of course," Dr. Chen nodded, respecting the boundary without pressing further. "I've included my personal contact information in your follow-up instructions. Please don't hesitate to reach out directly if Phoenix's condition changes or if other concerns arise." The subtext was clear. The offer extended beyond standard veterinary follow-up to include security concerns or decisions regarding the evidence Phoenix's case represented. Without explicitly stating it, Dr. Chen had positioned herself as a potential ally in whatever path Alex chose moving forward. As they prepared to leave, Phoenix now settled comfortably in Alex's arms with a clean bill of health and detailed rehabilitation plan. Dr. Chen offered one final thought. "Sometimes the most meaningful recoveries happen through helping others heal," she said quietly. "Phoenix is fortunate to have found you, Captain, and perhaps the reverse is equally true." The observation lingered in Alex's mind as they made their way back to the truck, Ranger once again flanking them with alert vigilance. The veterinarian had seen something Alex had only recently begun to acknowledge: that Phoenix's rescue had initiated healing that extended beyond the puppies. Physical wounds that in fighting for Phoenix's recovery, Alex had inadvertently begun addressing her own. As they drove away from Whitefish, returning to the mountain sanctuary that now felt less like retreat and more like strategic positioning, Alex reflected on the day's developments. They had gained not just medical confirmation of Phoenix's remarkable recovery, but potentially an ally with relevant expertise and connections. More significantly, they had successfully navigated re-engagement with the world beyond isolated wilderness, a small but meaningful step toward whatever came next. Phoenix dozed beside her, exhausted from the day's experiences but evidently content. The puppy's ability to adapt to new situations, to trust despite past betrayal, to engage with life's possibilities rather than withdraw from its challenges. These qualities had become subtle but powerful influences on Alex's own perspective. As the truck climbed higher into the mountains, leaving civilization behind for the security of isolated forest, Alex recognized that something fundamental had shifted. The cabin ahead was no longer merely a place to hide from the world and its painful realities. It had become, however temporarily, a place of preparation, a base from which both she and Phoenix might eventually re-engage with purpose rather than fear. "One mission at a time," she told the sleeping puppy beside her, "but we're making progress." And for the first time in longer than she could remember, those words felt like truth rather than wishful thinking. Progress. Measurable, meaningful, and pointing toward possibility rather than mere endurance. For both the discarded puppy and the wounded soldier, something that looked suspiciously like hope had begun to take root. The mountains stood sentinel in the gathering dusk as Alex's truck wound its way back toward the isolated cabin. Phoenix had awakened from her post-examination nap, her amber eyes tracking the passing landscape with renewed interest. The veterinary visit had confirmed what Alex already suspected. The puppy's recovery was progressing remarkably well, with no hidden complications threatening her continued improvement. But Dr. Chen's parting words lingered in Alex's thoughts. Sometimes the most meaningful recoveries happen through helping others heal. The observation had struck a chord deeper than the veterinarian could have known, resonating with something Alex had been gradually recognizing in herself. The focused determination she'd found to save Phoenix had awakened parts of her that had been dormant since Afghanistan, not just medical skills and tactical awareness, but something more fundamental: purpose, direction, meaning beyond mere survival. As they crested the final ridge before the turn-off to her property, Alex made an unexpected decision. Instead of taking the familiar route home, she continued another mile to Lookout Point, a natural overlook offering expansive views across the mountain range. She hadn't visited this spot since her first month in Montana, when she'd come seeking isolation rather than inspiration. "Small detour," she explained to Phoenix, who watched with curious attention as Alex parked and carefully lifted her from the truck. Ranger followed silently, understanding as always when routine shifted to something new. The viewing area was deserted, tourist season months away and the afternoon too late for casual visitors. Alex settled on a snow-cleared bench, cradling Phoenix in her lap, while Ranger took up watchful position nearby. Before them stretched a panoramic vista of snow-covered peaks and forested valleys, painted in deepening shades of blue and purple as the winter sun descended toward the horizon. "I used to be good at seeing the big picture," Alex told Phoenix, who gazed out at the spectacular view with matching intensity. "Strategic thinking," they called it in my performance reviews. The ability to see beyond immediate tactical situations to longer-term objectives and broader implications. She stroked Phoenix's ears absently, organizing thoughts that had been forming since their meeting with Dr. Chen. "Then, after the ambush, after losing my team, that ability just vanished. Couldn't see past the next hour, the next day. Survival mode. The mountains seemed like the perfect place to disappear into that narrowed existence." Phoenix shifted slightly to look up at her, those remarkable amber eyes reflecting the deepening twilight. The puppy's focused attention created a space for Alex's thoughts to crystallize, to take shape through articulation. "But that's not living, is it? It's just not dying, and neither of us came this far just to exist." Alex's voice strengthened as she continued, addressing both Phoenix and herself. "Dr. Chen helped me see something important today. Your case isn't just about one rescued puppy. It's about a system that treats living beings as disposable tools, that values compliance over character, that discards extraordinary potential because it doesn't fit predetermined specifications." The vastness of the landscape before them seemed to expand the scope of possibility, creating space for ideas that had felt too ambitious within the cabin's confines. What if your rescue isn't the end of a story, but the beginning? What if we could prevent other dogs from experiencing what you did? What if your survivor's journey could create something meaningful beyond just your individual recovery? The questions hung in the crisp mountain air, hypothetical, yet somehow substantial. As darkness gathered around them, stars emerging in the clear sky overhead, Alex felt something shift within her. The slow awakening of the strategic thinker she had once been, seeing beyond immediate circumstances to larger patterns and possibilities. "We need a plan," she told Phoenix, whose attentive gaze never wavered. "Not just for your rehabilitation, but for what comes next, for both of us." When they finally returned to the cabin an hour later, Alex moved with renewed energy, despite the long day. She built up the fire in the wood stove, prepared dinner for all three of them, and then did something she hadn't done since arriving in Montana. She cleared the small desk in the corner of the main room, wiped away months of accumulated dust, and retrieved a notebook and pen from an unused drawer. Phoenix watched from her bed near the stove as Alex began to write, organizing thoughts that had begun forming at Lookout Point. The familiar discipline of strategic planning returned with surprising ease, identifying objectives, assessing resources, evaluating potential approaches, establishing timelines. Skills that had once served military missions now turned toward a different purpose. By midnight, the outline had taken shape, pages filled with Alex's precise handwriting. She sat back, surveying the work with critical assessment. The plan was ambitious, but not unrealistic, leveraging her specific capabilities and experiences while acknowledging limitations. More importantly, it extended beyond mere reaction to proactive purpose, not just protecting Phoenix from potential threats, but addressing the system that had created those threats in the first place. "What do you think?" she asked the puppy, who had remained awake throughout Alex's planning session, watching with that characteristic focused attention. Too ambitious for a damaged soldier and a rehabilitating puppy. Phoenix responded by carefully rising from her bed and making her way to Alex's side, pressing against her leg with deliberate intention. The gesture communicated more clearly than words could have: confidence, commitment, partnership. "I'll take that as approval." Alex smiled, reaching down to stroke the golden fur. "First step tomorrow, then." Morning brought clear skies and fresh determination. After completing her regular security checks and Phoenix's rehabilitation exercises, Alex activated her satellite connection and sent 3 carefully crafted emails. The first went to Dr. Chen, requesting secure digital copies of Phoenix's medical documentation and proposing further discussion of potential oversight committee connections. The second was addressed to Wallace, outlining the broad strokes of her developing plan and requesting specific intelligence regarding Cerberus operational patterns and personnel. The third, most difficult to compose, went to Dr. Harrison, her former therapist, confirming their scheduled video session and acknowledging her readiness to discuss re-engagement with purposeful activity. With these initial communications sent, Alex turned her attention to the next phase of Phoenix's rehabilitation. The puppy's physical recovery had progressed remarkably well, with increasing strength and coordination evident in each day's activities. Now it was time to begin more structured training, not the harsh conditioning Cerberus had attempted, but positive reinforcement of Phoenix's natural intelligence and capabilities. "Today we start building on your strengths," Alex explained, as she set up a simple obstacle course in the cabin's main room, using furniture and household items. "Nothing too challenging yet, but we need to get those muscles working in coordinated ways." Phoenix approached the makeshift course with characteristic intensity, studying the arrangement before Alex had even begun explaining what she wanted. The puppy's analytical intelligence continued to impress. She seemed to grasp concepts almost before they were fully articulated, anticipating objectives with uncanny perception. Over the next 2 hours, they worked through progressive exercises. Simple retrieval tasks, basic directional commands, introductory obstacle navigation. Phoenix approached each challenge with focused determination. Her amber eyes locked on Alex for guidance, her body language communicating eager readiness despite still healing wounds. "Your brain is incredible," Alex told her during a rest period, genuine admiration in her voice. "The connections you're making, how quickly you process information. It's extraordinary. No wonder Cerberus couldn't handle you. You're too smart to be merely obedient." This observation crystallized something Alex had been gradually recognizing about Phoenix's situation. Cerberus hadn't discarded the puppy because she lacked capability. Quite the opposite. They had eliminated her because her particular form of intelligence included questioning, assessment, and independent judgment rather than blind compliance. Phoenix had likely resisted their conditioning, not out of defiance, but out of innate integrity, an unwillingness to surrender her essential nature to their demands. They wanted a weapon, Alex realized aloud. You were meant to be a partner. This distinction formed the cornerstone of the approach Alex was developing for Phoenix's training. Rather than imposing arbitrary standards or forcing compliance, she would build upon Phoenix's natural strengths, her remarkable intelligence, her capacity for trust despite trauma, her inherent drive to connect and contribute. The goal wasn't to create a perfectly obedient service animal, but to nurture a confident, capable working partner who could make independent decisions within a framework of shared purpose. By mid-afternoon, responses to her morning emails had arrived. Dr. Chen had provided the requested medical documentation, along with contact information for a Justice Department investigator who specialized in animal welfare violations within government contractors. Wallace had sent an encrypted file containing detailed Cerberus intelligence, including facility schedules, known personnel photographs, and vehicle descriptions. Valuable security information that would help Alex assess potential threats during necessary ventures beyond the cabin. Most surprising was Dr. Harrison's response. Rather than simply confirming their scheduled video session, the therapist had sent a thoughtful message acknowledging Alex's emerging sense of purpose and offering specific resources related to service dog training and trauma recovery partnerships. The message concluded with an observation that resonated deeply. The path forward often looks different than the path behind. Your willingness to envision new purpose shows remarkable strength. These supportive responses reinforced Alex's growing conviction that their situation contained potential beyond mere survival or individual recovery. Phoenix's case could potentially contribute to meaningful accountability for an organization operating outside ethical boundaries. More importantly, the partnership developing between them represented a model of mutual healing that transcended conventional approaches to both canine training and human trauma recovery. As evening approached, Alex prepared for her scheduled video session with Dr. Harrison, the first direct therapeutic engagement she'd agreed to in over 7 months. The prospect created understandable anxiety, but she approached it with the same discipline she applied to tactical challenges, setting up her laptop in a position that afforded both privacy and security. Phoenix seemed to sense the significance of the upcoming conversation, settling beside Alex's chair with quiet attentiveness. Ranger took up position near the door, maintaining his customary vigilance while providing space for this important interaction. When Dr. Harrison's face appeared on the screen, the therapist's expression showed carefully controlled surprise at the visible changes in her patient. 7 months earlier, Alex had been withdrawn, physically diminished by injury and psychological trauma, her posture communicating defeat rather than the military bearing that had once defined her. Now, despite lingering evidence of her self-imposed isolation, something fundamental had shifted. A rekindling of focused intensity in her eyes, a straightening of her shoulders, subtle but significant indicators of renewed engagement with purpose. "It's good to see you, Captain Novak," Dr. Harrison began, her tone warm but professional. "I appreciate your willingness to reconnect." The conversation that followed was more productive than Alex had anticipated. She shared Phoenix's story in greater detail than her earlier email had contained, explaining not just the rescue circumstances, but the developing bond between them and the rehabilitative effects this connection had created for both of them. "It's remarkable how this relationship has catalyzed changes you've been resistant to in more traditional therapeutic approaches," Dr. Harrison observed, her clinical assessment delivered without judgment. "The responsibility of caring for Phoenix has engaged your natural protective instincts and leadership capabilities, creating purpose that bypasses the self-criticism that's blocked your recovery." Alex nodded, recognizing the accuracy of this observation. "When it's about her needs rather than mine, the barriers don't seem to apply." I can't afford to be incapacitated by guilt or doubt when her well-being depends on my functionality. And yet, the benefits flow in both directions, Dr. Harrison noted. You're describing a genuinely reciprocal, healing relationship. Phoenix provides motivation for you to re-engage with your strengths and capabilities while you provide the security and support she needs to recover from her own trauma. This framing helped Alex articulate something she'd been intuiting but hadn't fully conceptualized. It's partnership rather than just caregiving. She's not just a responsibility, she's becoming a collaborator in whatever comes next. Dr. Harrison leaned forward slightly, her interest evident. And what do you envision coming next, Captain? You mentioned developing plans beyond immediate rehabilitation. Alex shared the outline of her emerging vision, not just completing Phoenix's recovery and training, but potentially using their case to create accountability for Cerberus's unethical practices. More significantly, she described her preliminary thoughts about developing a specialized training program for service. Dogs that honored their individual capabilities rather than forcing compliance to standardized expectations. The traditional models focus on creating canine tools that perform specific functions, she explained, warming to the subject as she articulated ideas that had been forming since her planning session the previous night. But what if we approached it differently? What if we recognized dogs like Phoenix as sentient partners with unique contributions beyond just executing commands? Training that builds on individual strengths rather than enforcing uniform standards. Dr. Harrison's expression reflected genuine interest rather than therapeutic neutrality. That represents a significant paradigm shift in working dog development. What makes you believe such an approach could be effective? Because I've seen the alternative fail, Alex responded with growing conviction. Cerberus tried to force Phoenix into their predetermined mold, and when she didn't fit, they literally threw her away. But the qualities that made her unsuitable for their purposes, her independent thinking, her analytical intelligence, her capacity for connection, those are precisely what make her extraordinary. What if those aren't flaws to be eliminated, but strengths to be cultivated? The conversation continued for nearly an hour, evolving from therapeutic check-in to substantive discussion of Alex's developing vision. Dr. Harrison offered valuable perspective without attempting to redirect or constrain Alex's emerging sense of purpose, recognizing the healing potential in this natural unfolding of renewed engagement with meaningful objectives. As they concluded the session with plans for regular follow-up, the therapist offered a final observation. Captain, when you first returned from Afghanistan, you described feeling that your purpose had died alongside your team. What I'm hearing today suggests not that you found a replacement purpose, but that you're discovering how your fundamental calling has evolved to meet new circumstances. The core elements remain: protection of the vulnerable, standing against injustice, leveraging your unique capabilities to serve others. The expression has simply changed form. This insight stayed with Alex long after the video call ended, resonating with her own developing understanding of what Phoenix's rescue had initiated. Not a distraction from grief or a temporary focus to occupy her damaged mind, but a genuine continuation of the commitment to service that had defined her military career, redirected toward new objectives, but flowing from the same essential source. As darkness settled fully around the isolated cabin, Alex sat beside the wood stove, with Phoenix pressed against her side. The puppy's warmth a constant reminder of the tangible reality underlying abstract plans. Ranger lay nearby, his vigilant presence completing their small unit. "We're going to build something meaningful," Alex told Phoenix, who looked up at her with unwavering attention. "Not just your recovery, not just my readjustment, but something larger that might help others like us? It won't be easy. Cerberus has resources, connections, influence. They won't appreciate being exposed or challenged. Phoenix's response was characteristic. Not passive acceptance, but focused engagement, her intelligent eyes communicating what seemed like genuine comprehension. This wasn't anthropomorphizing, Alex had come to realize, but recognition of legitimate interspecies communication. Phoenix might not understand specific words, but she grasped intention, emotion, commitment, the underlying currents that defined their developing partnership. The next morning brought fresh snow and renewed purpose. Alex began implementing the more structured daily schedule she had outlined in her planning session. Physical rehabilitation exercises for Phoenix, basic training activities focused on positive reinforcement of natural capabilities, progressively longer outdoor excursions to build stamina, and specific security protocols for monitoring potential threats from Cerberus. Phoenix responded to this increased structure with evident enthusiasm, approaching each activity with focused determination that belied her young age. Her physical recovery continued to exceed expectations, the limp barely noticeable now, wounds healing cleanly, strength and coordination improving daily. More impressive was her cognitive development, the speed with which she grasped new concepts and anticipated next steps in training sequences. "You're going to need challenges worthy of that brain," Alex observed, as Phoenix completed a complex retrieval task that would have challenged many adult working dogs. Basic obedience isn't going to cut it. This realization prompted Alex to expand her research beyond standard training protocols, investigating specialized approaches that emphasized problem-solving and independent decision-making rather than rote compliance. Her military experience with working dogs provided valuable foundation, but she recognized the need to move beyond conventional methods to develop an approach specifically tailored to Phoenix's unique capabilities. Wallace proved unexpectedly helpful in this pursuit, connecting Alex with former colleagues who had developed innovative training approaches for specialized military working dogs. These contacts provided resources and insights that helped shape Alex's evolving methodology, offering guidance without imposing rigid frameworks that might limit Phoenix's natural development. Dr. Chen contributed medical perspective, providing detailed information about physical development milestones and appropriate progression of activity levels. More significantly, she shared research from veterinary behavioral science that supported Alex's instinct toward partnership-based training rather than dominance-oriented approaches. Even Dr. Harrison offered valuable input from the human side of the equation, suggesting ways to structure training that reinforced positive psychological patterns for both Alex and Phoenix. The therapist recognized the healing potential in their developing relationship and provided frameworks that maximized mutual benefit while avoiding potential pitfalls. This network of support, professional colleagues offering specialized expertise without attempting to control or direct Alex's overall approach, represented significant shift from her isolated existence of previous months. She was re-engaging with collaborative process, incorporating others' insights while maintaining autonomy and decision-making authority. The balance felt both familiar from her military leadership experience and refreshingly different in its civilian application. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.